So we finally made it to the 5th and final season of Jackie Chan Adventures. Of all the seasons, people are much more critical of season 5 than any others, so I'll go over the season in depth and we'll finally learn how it ends. There will be a lot of fun trivia on the way, like one thing I've never mentioned is the end credit song to the first season of Jackie Chan. Well, if that sounds familiar to you, it's probably because it's sung by Wheatus. You may know the group that sings Teenage Dirtbag. Also, this song just replaces the lyrics to one of their other songs, Punk Ass Biatch. It's just a testimony, you're full of baloney, you're a stupid shit. I'm sure there was at least one dad out there watching this show with his kid, and when the credits played after the first episode, they were like, are they really about to say it? I don't know, maybe I find that more interesting than I should, but let's just jump into the first episode. The first episode starts with the stars being aligned for bad chi, allowing the green dragon Drago, the son of Shendu, to break out of prison in section 13. Drago is the main antagonist of this season, and similar to past villains, he was introduced in the previous season, which is always cool to see. It definitely adds to the scale and importance of the scenario, but I feel Drago is kinda derivative in a way, by far the weakest execution of a season antagonist. Starting off the show with Shendu was pretty cool. Having a big dragon really sets the tone for a show that has a lot to do with Chinese history and mythology and the zodiac animals, even though Shendu was nothing more than a fancy plate for the majority of the season, so maybe you'd consider the Dark Hand to be the antagonist at first. Daolon Wang was an interesting antagonist of the third season because he acted as a direct rival for Uncle in a way, but also turning the Dark Hand into demons gave us a lot more cartoony potential in fights, because there's so much more that can be done to demons than humans, like pushing them off a cliff and they'll just poof back to their lair, defeated, as opposed to dying and just ending the show. Tarakudo, the Oni mask, was also really interesting, as this delves more into Japanese culture and makes the show feel more about East Asian culture as a whole, as opposed to just Chinese culture. There's other aspects of Asian culture outside of Hong Kong and China within the first few seasons, like the Shadowkan ninjas. And while one could argue that ninjas are Chinese in origin, I feel the depiction within the show seems to be pretty Japanese. But there's so much that can be said about Jackie Chan Adventures being a successful original production with a big collaboration between artists in America and Hong Kong, especially when the landscape of Saturday morning cartoons was dominated by dubbed anime in the late 90s, early 2000s. So to move on to Shendu's son was kind of weird. Maybe it felt more edgy to have a teenage dragon who resented his dad here, but they just don't really do that much with him. Like when we first meet him, a big part of the novelty is that he's from the future and fights future Jade, who is voiced by Lucy Liu of all people. So for this season to revolve around Drago while taking place in the present is definitely the weakest concept for a season antagonist. Getting back to the plot of the episode, we see the Dark Hand has taken up lives as peaceful farmers, which is really funny. It's always funny to see characters give up a life of evil and just live a quiet, peaceful life. Drago turns the Dark Hand into fellow dragons, which seems cool, but I don't see it being that interesting for a whole season if they're just gonna make puns the whole time, like, get ready to fry. Like, we already saw them beat demons with plenty of powers. It almost feels like this is a downgrade for them. They're looking for this magical fan of the immortals that was used to defeat the wind demon, so we get a fight in a car wash, which is a pretty unique location. Also, I love that the car wash even has a traditional Chinese roof. I wonder if something like this ever existed in the real world. Drago tries to absorb the chi from the fan of the immortals, but is stopped by Jade, who unknowingly absorbs the fan instead. You may remember in season 2, there was mentions of 8 legendary warriors who defeated the big underworld demons thousands of years ago, each with a specific weapon like the fan of immortality. It's kinda cool how they bring this plot back here, fighting over the fan and Jade eventually turning more frog-like to reflect the wind demon, but really it just feels a little convoluted in execution. So Drago and the enforcers show up to school, and Jade defeats the dragons by accidentally burping so loud it uproots this climbing dome and pins the enforcers to the wall, and Uncle recites, you guessed it, the chi spell. So Drago retreats as we learn that he'll be seeking out the 6 other immortal weapons and the chi attached to them, or the world will be under Drago's rule. I gotta admit, this is probably the least interesting concept for a season. It feels like half the concept of season 2 with the chi demons, and half season 4 with characters getting possessed by demons and acting differently. I don't want to jump to conclusions yet, so it'll be really interesting to see how a more typical episode plays out. But before we move on, we have to talk about Jackie's question of the day, which today asks Jackie to describe chi in his own words. And nothing, I mean nothing, can prepare you for his answer. One thing I read about these live-action segments were that they're filmed by the executive producer Jeff Kline, and he talks about how these Question of the Day segments were largely inspired by the live-action post-credit scenes from the TV show The Monkees had. So I looked up some episodes of it, and I found this clip of them talking about how they got a lot of flack for their long hair, which is pretty funny, especially when you consider their hair is like barely below their ears. Episode 2 starts with Uncle creating an ancient chi compass that'll find the new weapons and absorb the chi out of them. Jade's watching some kind of Survivor parody on TV, and the Chi-O-Matic immediately points towards this Amnesty Idol gourd thing on the TV. And am I the only one who thinks it's weird the Chi Finder points at the TV, a bunch of pixels? Like a CRT from the early 2000s, I bet it looked like this from the Chan's point of view. The gourd is an enchanted item that belongs to the water demon, the evil mermaid serpent, so the Chan fam travels to French Polynesia, where they compete in this challenge to cross a bridge but get mangoes catapulted at them by their rival family of Bavarians. What is with Jackie Chan Adventures and Bavaria? So the Chans lose and don't get the Chi Gourd, and we get an elimination ceremony among the Chans, which is really hilarious in concept. And Jade actually betrays Uncle here, getting him thrown off the island.
It's nothing personal, dude.
Uncle has been bamboozled! Jade! We had a deal!
I love the idea of the Chans actually playing the game and eliminating each other, but they don't really build up the joke, so I didn't know they betrayed Uncle until after it happened. The next challenge is eating a bunch of larvae and other insects, which is pretty gross, but both teams end up vomiting, rendering the challenge pointless. I don't know if it was just to pad the runtime, but yeah, it was just pointless. The next challenge is a jungle race jumping across platforms and bridges, and the Chans easily win this, as they should. I mean, they do this every day fighting evil. I'm amazed it was as close as it was. Like, how is this random family of Bavarians giving them competition here? Our fun and games are over though, as Drago shows up and grabs the Chi Gourd, becoming a giant water demon. He creates a giant tsunami wave, but Uncle's on a boat that was shipping him back home after being eliminated, and is in the right place at the right time to recite the Chi spell. Drago's defeated by this, which I don't find terribly interesting. Like, it'd be a lot cooler if Drago joined in on the competition or something. I feel so many episodes are built up pretty well and then just end with a simple chi spell. It's interesting to see that the chi item will give us some kind of demon fusion each episode, but the pace and everything of this season just feels a bit off and slow. I don't know. So it was a really cool concept for an episode, but a little lackluster in its execution. So let's move on to Jackie's question of the day, where he's asked what his favorite part of being a kid was. Jackie says for him, it's the freedom from work and bills and stuff, which makes sense, but it's also kind of funny in a way when you consider that Jackie's really successful and makes a lot of money now, and Jackie notably didn't have a lot of money growing up and was part of an academy where he trained the majority of the day, every day. So let's move on. Episode 3 starts with Drago breaking into Section 13 in the middle of the night and is thwarted by Jackie and security. Drago runs off, talking about how he'll fulfill his destiny without the help of his father, Shendu. So he holds open applications for new henchmen and gets some really weird auditions like these gymnasts, a cowboy, Valmont.
Next!
But we actually get a really fun callback to this character Strike Master Ice, who I presume is a reference to Vanilla Ice based on his appearance and the way he talks. You may remember this crew from the episode last season where the Dark Hand turns to a life of good, and on top of this mountain, Jackie and Strike Master Ice fight over this stolen museum artifact. Meanwhile, today's Jade's birthday, but this has to be put on hold as the Chants have to go to San Diego for the new Chi weapon. The Ice crew gets turned into dragons, and they actually give them interesting distinction distinctions, as it seems they really focus on giving the crew speed, power, and fire breath as 3 different abilities, which makes the fights a bit more clear than just having everyone able to do everything, I guess. At the San Diego Zoo, they find the Chi Lotus Pod, which a panda grabs, possessing the Moon Demon's Chi, controlling gravity, and giving us a floating panda in the air just eating bamboo. So the Chi Demons chase the floating panda as Jackie makes his way through the zoo, dodging gorillas and gators and elephants, but Draco absorbs the Moon Demon's powers. Jackie's able to grab the powers of the Earth Demon's Chi, so we have this Earth versus Moon fight as Jade and Toru try to hold their own against the Ice Crew. Uncle's able to absorb the Moon Demon from Drago, and Jackie's able to trap the other dragons into the ground using his earthbending abilities, and they get home with 4 minutes left in Jade's birthday. We get a little birthday party for Jade with not only the Jade team showing up, but some other old friends like Mordecai the Pig and Super Moose. So is he just still around, like just flying around the world? Like what is he doing? This still image is one of the only times we see the Jade team this season, so enjoy it while it lasts. Jackie's question of the day is if Jackie feels he has yin and yang to his personality. Jackie says he sometimes feels strong and sometimes feels weak, and even with his stunts, there's a level of caution he needs to operate with. I guess this is a pretty fitting question for the Earth vs. Moon episode, and I do appreciate how they ask Jackie more questions related to elements of the show, like Chi and yin and yang. In episode 4, Jackie helps escort a valuable artifact to a museum and has to fight off a group of 3 masked villains who fail to steal the artifact and escape on a chopper. Jackie suspects the Dark Hand would be behind this, but can't prove it was them. Meanwhile, Jade quits the Buttercup Scouts because she's bored of the activities like quilting and wants to join the Dragon Scouts, which is all boys. This episode's actually pretty ahead of its time, with girls wanting to join the Boy Scouts, and we know Jade's always been a tomboy, so it is pretty interesting to see. At the school that night for the Dragon Scouts meeting, Jackie bumps into the Dark Hand enforcers who are at the school as janitors. Jackie fights them, but we soon learn they're here because they all have a nephew in the Dragon Scouts and they want to set good examples for their kids. Their designs are pretty fun too. Like I love how anime Chao's kid is. He kind of looks like Vegeta or maybe Shobu from Duel Masters. Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting a Duel Masters reference in 2024. Jackie says Jade can't jump to conclusions about the kids even though they may seem evil, so Jade goes to her first Dragon Scouts meeting, which is bird watching, but Jade runs off with the Rooster Talisman and gets into a fight with the Enforcer kids about whose uncle is the best. They throw Jade's hat over the wall to the zoo, and Jade jumps into the bear exhibit to get it back, and gets in trouble with the Scoutmaster for disobeying their rules of entering the zoo. Because of this altercation, the Dark Hand Guardians, as well as Jackie, have all become volunteers and go to the museum where we see the golden squid artifact that was nearly stolen earlier. The power goes out momentarily and the squid disappears, and Jackie suspects the enforcers of stealing the squid, but they actually ran off to steal toilet paper because they're running low at home, which you could still argue is stealing, I guess, but I guess it doesn't really matter, I don't know. Jade apprehends the kids who have the golden squid in their bag, but this was actually a ploy set up by the museum curator, and I gotta admit, I really was not expecting him to be the main villain, especially since it was a group of 3 villains and we have so many villainous trios throughout this episode. Jade actually teams up with the Enforcer kids to apprehend the curator, who in his escape trips, dropping the golden squid into Finn's hands. As we see, the Dark Hand is now doing construction for their community service, and wow, they change gears fast. Jackie comes out to apologize for suspecting the Dark Hand of stealing, and then realizes they have the squid and defeats them in a fight. The Enforcers ask Jackie not to reveal their life of crime to their kids because maybe they'll grow up to be good, and then thinking about it further, they really doubt the kids will actually ever be good either. The episode ends with the crew being arrested and telling the kids they have to go away for some kind of business trip and maybe they'll be back next summer. Definitely my favorite episode of the season so far. The mystery of who's trying to steal the squid's really well done because we have so many trios like Strike Master Ice, the new nephews, even the Dark Hand, and I love the designs of the nephews too. So overall it was a pretty fun episode. Jackie's question of the day is if he had any bad jobs outside of acting, and Jackie talks about how he worked as a construction worker, cleaned and cooked after martial arts school, but comes to the overall conclusion that there's really no bad job and he was learning to become more of a professional in whatever he was doing, which is a pretty nice outlook. Episode 5 starts with the Chans grabbing the Sky Demon's chi out of a flute in a merry-go-round in Australia. Like, I wonder if they did some Mad Libs for where these chi weapons would be found. Jade's on a field trip to the Windsor Mansion, which is based off the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, and we finally get the first demon transformation that isn't with Drago this season, as Jade's teacher becomes a bat-like demon with the Sky Demon's chi. Kinda interesting, the Sky Demon, both times we've seen it, has been a character interacting with Jade at school, because the last time we saw him, he pretended to be a new kid in Jade's class. This episode's my least favorite so far. I just find it not very interesting, but I think the tension of making a Haunted Mansion episode is a great concept, and there's some really interesting character moments, like with Jade's teacher fighting Drago, eventually saving Jade and realizing she doesn't hate Jade, and she's a teacher, of course she doesn't hate kids. But I don't know, I feel like I knew at least a few teachers that hated kids, but I guess most of them were in middle and high school, so I can't really fault them for that, to be honest. The Haunted Mansion is a cool concept, and getting more depth to Jade's normally strict, one-dimensional teacher is really cool, so I think this episode's pretty interesting in that regard. There's just not a whole lot for me to summarize here. It's mainly good horror, fighting, and ambiance. But they do save the day and retrieve the Sky Demon from the teacher, giving us only a few more Chi Demon weapons to go. Jackie's question of the day is if he ever dressed up for Halloween or a party, and Jackie said as a kid he would, but nowadays he never does, and honestly it makes sense, because he dresses up all the time for films anyways, it probably would feel more unnatural for Jackie to just dress like a regular person. Episode 6 starts with the Chans visiting Uncle's hometown of Fengdu, China, and due to the flooding, we see a large portion of this will be gone as a dam is being built, which is really interesting since this episode released before the summer of 2005, over a year before the completion of the real-world Three Gorges Dam. As always, it's really cool to see aspects of Chinese history within the show, because over 1 million people were relocated when the real dam was built due to the rising waters, so to make Uncle actually be a part of this is just a really cool touch. I never heard of the Fengdu Ghost City, but it seems like a really cool tour to take sometime, so if I ever do travel to China in this area, I definitely want to do this. The episode's pretty tense with everyone annoyed at each other for one reason or another, like Uncle saying Jade's stubborn like a mule for not taking off her headphones, or that Jackie's a big-headed know-it-all, and Jade says Toru's acting like his mother, who, as we know, is, something else. There's this possessed mirror with spirits living inside that actualizes all these flaws the Chans have with each other, and big-headed Jackie will be in my nightmares for a long time. The effects of the spells get worse and worse, like this visual of Jackie with an even bigger head and Jade almost fully donkey now is really funny, especially out of context. Like if I go back in time and show this as the beginning of this video with no context, you probably are gonna say, what the hell is that? The Chans eventually put their differences aside and are able to capture the spirits in the mirror and save the day. Overall, a really weird episode, but pretty funny and definitely worth a watch just for some of these really funny moments and visuals alone, even though it really has nothing to do with the plot of the season. Jackie's question of the day is if he had an imaginary friend as a kid, and he said he didn't, which makes sense because he was constantly surrounded by fellow martial arts students slash performers all the time as a kid. He was probably never really lonely, at least in a literal sense, which is considered a primary cause for imaginary friends. So I gotta ask, did any of you watching this have imaginary friends growing up? I never did, but I've seen it so much in shows, I'd be curious to hear if anyone had any stories about this. Episode 7 starts with this Super Moose superfan, Larry, turning into a kind of vigilante superhero from the absorption of the Earth Demon's chi, kind of like how Captain Black did this last season. A comic convention's a fun location to have fights in, because everyone would just kind of assume these people are all in costume anyways, kind of like when the Chans fought Shendu in LA and everyone assumed it was special effects. Larry becomes too powerful, but Jade's able to make an emotional appeal, telling Larry that Super Moose wouldn't hurt the others around him, and Larry's able to fight the urges of the demon inside him, allowing the Chans to retrieve the chi back of the Earth Demon. Part of me feels this episode's missing a little oomph, but I love when the show has characters find a reason deep inside to fight what's possessing them. It just feels really gratifying to me, and it happened a few times last season with people breaking out of the Oni masks. Overall, I really have no desire to talk more about this episode in particular. Definitely my least favorite episode of the season, if not the whole show. Nothing too egregious, delicious, I just find it really, really boring. Jackie's question of the day is, what does Jackie do to relax? He says he calls up friends and listens to music and loves to watch TV, especially because he feels he can learn so much from it, which makes sense as an actor, writer, director, and producer. So let's move on. Episode 8. The next demon power is within the castanets on the sunken oceanic ship, not to be confused with its sister ship, the Titanic. So the Chans are on a submarine traveling towards the oceanic, where they're fought by a giant enemy crab that Jade's able to defeat with her gamer grill skills. The ship gets damaged in this fight, and they'll have to remove some weight to get the submarine back up, so Jackie exits the submarine and is warned not to resurface too fast or he'll get the bends, or decompression sickness. Jackie gets attacked by the dragon henchmen. You know, I don't know what to call them. The ice dragons? No, they breathe fire. Jackie ends up resurfacing too quickly, and we get another fight where Jackie kinda acts like a drunken master, which is always fun. Drago comes in and strands the Chans on a block of ice, absorbing the chi of the Thunder Demon, finally giving us a time this season where Drago wins. I always appreciate when the villain wins, because not only does it give us more tension and suspense of who's gonna win a fight, you know, the hero always winning is kinda boring, but it also gives the plot more continuity, because you'll know they have to fix this next episode. The episode ends with Jackie in some kind of compression chamber to remedy his bends, and Uncle also gets thrown in one because he smells like garlic. It's really funny that Jade just says Uncle's also acting crazy because of the bends, and Captain Black just believes her, like Uncle really doesn't help his case here. Jackie's question of the day is if he surfs the web, and he says not really, just when he's looking for the answers to questions and stuff. But you know, this was probably asked to Jackie in 2003 or 04, like he could have still had dial-up that made these sounds. Episode 9 is just a huge dogfight between the Chans and the dragons, and I swear that's not supposed to be a pun, but Drago does become more dog-like here as he absorbs the powers of the Thunder Demon. We see Drago has taken over the Space Needle in Seattle as their new hideout, in part because the rainy weather would help boost his electricity powers. And this is a really cool hideout now that they made it a total man cave for the guys, like they even got a roller coaster in here. I have no idea where a coaster is fitting inside the Space Needle. I don't normally like episodes that are all combat, but this episode is seriously intense and really could have just been the finale to the whole show for me. Jade even gets in a mecha fight here, but as we know, Jade has the gamer grill skills and easily wins. Speaking of epic gamer moments, the episode starts with Jade fighting her frenemy Drew on the playground in some game on their Nintendo DS's, and it's always interesting to see the evolution of technology within a show as it progresses. The episode ends with the dragons running off as Drago claws down the Space Needle, and Jade says she no longer needs her Space Mercenaries video game, as we soon learn why.
Jade, I do not believe this will fit in the overhead compartment.
That line delivery kills me. There's definitely a lot of lines more like this season that come off as like casual and impromptu, kind of like a Family Guy style of dialogue and humor, and it's really funny overall. Jackie's question of the day is if he likes roller coasters, fitting for this episode with a coaster inside the Space Needle. Jackie says he loves anything that gives him a rush, like a coaster or planes, which isn't the craziest answer in the world, but next episode's question of the day does reveal more to us about his love for flying, as we'll soon see. Episode 10 starts with Jade training Toru to go on a diet and lose some weight, as Jackie and Uncle go to Quebec to find the immortal drum. Jackie and Uncle bring home all these chopsticks, looking for the right one, but fall asleep while searching through them. Toru sneaks into the kitchen for a midnight snack to cheat on his diet, accidentally finding the chi chopsticks and becoming an even larger demon, eating through the entire kitchen like he's eating the boxes and cans here. The dragons try to break into the antique shop, but Toru has now become almost entirely the large mountain demon's sister, so we get a fight outside in the city, with Toru destroying everything in sight. Uncle wants to reverse Toru back to normal, but they can't since he would be crushed by the bus he's holding up. Drago then jumps in and absorbs the chi, but Jackie jumps in at the last moment to save Toru, and then Uncle takes the chi back from Drago right away. So now all the demon chi powers are within the Chan's possession, but we have a two-part finale left to end season 5, and Jackie Chan adventures as a whole, as well as one more episode I believe most people would consider filler or not really contributing to the overall plot and arc of the season. The question of the day curious if Jackie's ever flown a plane, and like, that's gotta be the most random question. They had to have known he's flown a plane before. Like, what if he just said no?
Hey, Jackie, have you ever flown a plane?
No.
Jackie said he's flown one with the pilot and co-pilot letting him fly for a little, so I'd assume he doesn't have a pilot's license or anything, but Jackie says he'd really like to learn to fly a helicopter. Maybe Jackie's just saying, screw it, I'll fly the helicopter myself, because you may be aware of some of Jackie's stunts involving helicopters in the past. You know, you can really just Google Jackie Chan in any random vehicle or item, and you can really find some crazy story about anything. Episode 11 has the Chans getting the final parts of the spell, these yin and yang arcanums of chi, with the yin half being located on this tropical shore where they're attacked by this underwater chi demon they barely escape from. At school, Jade notices this boy Jimmy, who doesn't really fit in, so she brings him home to the antique shop where he saves the yin chi artifact from falling on the ground. Later, Jade notices a mysterious figure break into Section 13, who she follows all the way to the future, where Jade bumps into her older future self again, who we met last season the first time the Chans fought Drago. We meet the older Chans again, and I still find it hilarious that Uncle looks exactly the same still. Like, I need to know how old he is here. We see Toru's finally become a chi wizard, and that Jimmy's now his apprentice. Section 13's arch enemy in the future is this villain named Iso, who future Jade says must be hiding out somewhere near the mall. And when future Jade tries to apprehend present Jade from getting them into trouble with Section 13, Jade presses the elevator buttons in such a way that it enters a secret code leading to Iso's hideout. They manage to steal the missing Arcanum half, destroying this somewhat futuristic mall and their hoverboard escape in the process. This recklessness gets Jade kicked out of Section 13, but Jimmy has an Arcanum locator spell he made that might just get Jade her job back. They climb up the peak of a dormant volcano and grab the Arcanum, escaping from a griffin, and before the Jades can redeem themselves, we see Jimmy take the completed Arcanum, revealing he was Iso this whole time. What a twist. He gets an army of purple chi demons, similar to the Oni Mask demons last season, but Jade gets a smart, really heartfelt idea in which she returns to the past, not just to play shitty games that suck ass, but she brings Kid Jimmy back to the future and shows him how he becomes a villain, and then we see the Chans use the talismans to fight Iso, turning the demons into cats and turning invisible to defeat Iso, with this extra insurance on top that Jimmy won't become evil again in the future. It's such a cool idea to follow up on this plot of the future Jade from last season, and adding this random character Jimmy to the mix is interesting. I think seeing more of the backstory of Drago would have been a lot more impactful, because the first time we're introduced to future Jade is because of Drago, and I still kind of feel like we don't know that much about him. I could almost argue I know more about Jimmy than Drago. Regardless, it's a pretty interesting episode, and seeing the future designs of everyone is always a treat, but at the same time, it is a little bit of a reminder of the wasted potential of this season, and I can't help but wonder if more future elements were intended to be part of Season 5 overall. The question today is if Jackie wishes he could ever see into the future. Jackie says he really hopes he could have this kind of power so he could save a lot of people, which I feel Jackie's kinda said before, but at least it lines up with today's episode, seeing the future versions of Jade and everyone else once more. So now let's move on to the two-part finale of Jackie Chan Adventures. Episode 12 starts with Captain Black, Jackie, and Uncle taken hostage by Drago's Ice Dragon crew, and they make a hostage negotiation with Jade and Toru to exchange the chi artifacts for the lives of their family. We learn when Drago gets access to the chi containment, the demons of the underworld will all be freed to live among the earth. They kinda try to frame it in a way like the demons are suffering and it's unfair they live down there. Like how animes sometimes give a villain a reason to win just as good as the hero, but the show isn't nearly fleshed out enough to make Drago one of those villains, whose motives are more just than the protagonist. Toru has a chi spell that may help save the day, but they'll need some kind of essence of Drago to complete this, so Jade gets the idea to grab a piece of Shendu for the spell. Seeing Shendu here talk about his traitor son is pretty interesting, and they do a great job of making our original big bad seem intimidating thing, even as a locked up plate. I thought he was gonna be set free here to get a sample, and then they were gonna have to fight Shendu and or Drago, but it turns out they just chip off a piece of his plate and get moving towards the Golden Gate Bridge, which now that I think about it, seems like a horrible place for a hostage negotiation, even still at 3 a.m. At the bridge, Strike Master Ice and his crew end up betraying Drago because they want the power to rule over the demons themselves. They actually end up defeating Drago, and I love how they try to split the 8 chi weapons 3 ways, because they eventually come to the conclusion that one person can only get 2, and they give him the moon and the earth to make up for this. I guess I never really thought what would be the most powerful of these chi spells, but it's hard for me to argue against the earth and the moon, but it is just a really funny impromptu scene. Obviously, Drago can't be defeated this easily, and comes back out of the water to absorb the chi using a new spell we haven't heard before. I looked up what he's saying, and the official website writes it out like this, but I can't find anything on what it means. Now, Uncle's Yumo Guigui spell is in Cantonese, so I'd assume this is the same, but I see nothing online, and Google translates even more useless than I anticipated. Like, it can't even translate Uncle's spell that we know the meaning of already, and we know it's in Cantonese too. But if you've watched my videos before, you may know I hate not knowing the answers to stuff, and I hyperfixate on just random stuff. And it was hard for me to believe no one online translated a spell said once in passing in the final episode of a 20-year-old cartoon. But the answer to this is much crazier than I could have imagined. Now, I don't know any Mandarin or Cantonese, but something about how this phrase was written out just didn't look Cantonese to me, you know, it didn't pass the vibe check. So I tried breaking it down further, and my leading theory is that Drago actually speaks the language Igbo here, which is primarily spoken in Nigeria, so it may seem pretty random, but I've read a lot of articles about Chinese citizens living in Nigeria, especially around the turn of the 21st century. Google Translate's still so broken. If you search more than a few words at a time, it might as well just say IDK LOL. But breaking it down further, Drago seems to be saying something roughly along the lines of "let him go and make me God." But that's just a theory, an overly long theory. But hey, if you made it this far into the video, what were you expecting? But for real, thank you, I appreciate you watching. You, more than anyone else. So the episode ends with Drago absorbing the powers and destroying the bridge, giving us one final episode to see once and for all what will become of the world with Drago now possessing all the spells, and in turn, the arrival of all the demons of the underworld. But before we get to that, Jackie's question of the day. The question is, what is Jackie's most embarrassing moment? And he talks about how he was sweaty after filming a difficult shot and wanted to cool off in the water, and well, I'll let Jackie tell you about it, cause it's kinda crazy.
I take off my shirt, I try to take off my pants, but my pants stick with my underwear. My underwear is gone.
It's not that bad of a story, but something about the way he described it, my jaw dropped. Like, I couldn't believe he said this. Maybe it's because I was watching the show and just imagining cartoon Jackie saying this. But on that topic, I probably should have mentioned a long time ago outside of the comments on the videos that Jackie Chan isn't voiced by Jackie Chan, but by James C., who among his many roles, you may know mostly as the cabbage merchant from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, my cabbages! My cabbages! My cap! Oh, forget it!
So let's move on to the final episode of Jackie Chan. You know, I don't want this series to end. I do want to make a follow-up about other random Jackie Chan Adventures media, like the video game and the cards and the talismans and stuff. So stick around after this video, because I do plan to talk about it more sometime in the future. It's not all over, you know. Episode 13 resumes with the destruction of the bridge, with the Chans falling into a ship full of fish, which may be worse than the water for Toru.
I hate fish.
Back at section 13, we get one final time where they tell Jade to not interfere, and like, come on, it's been 95 episodes, just give up, she's never gonna listen. Uncle talks to Shendu, who says if he's let free, he could deal with his son and make sure they're spared, which Uncle obviously refuses. He then gets a knock on the door, which is our old pals, the Dark Hand Enforcers, and as I've said previously, I absolutely love when villains and everyone come together to fight a bigger evil. It's always just a fun touch for me, but it also is a really good way of showing how dire the stakes are. They even help Uncle create a new spell, and speaking of old friends joining the fight, a bus is falling off the edge of the destroyed bridge, but El Toro Fuerte, Viper, and Paco show up. And wow, they've been missing all season except for that one background shot in Jade's birthday, which is kinda sad. The J-Team episodes are some of my favorites of the whole series. We see Drago's final form here, a kinda Cthulhu-esque winged dragon, and he turns the ice crew into elemental demons to go destroy Section 13. In the destruction of the hideout, Toru holds up a collapsing wall, telling Jade to escape. Jade has a couple talismans on her, the rabbit and monkey, debating what to use to save Toru, but in a surprising twist, she listens for once, and uses the rabbit talisman to escape. As she looks at the aftermath of the crumbled hideout Toru was in, it does hit pretty hard, giving us maybe the first time Jade's ever listened to anyone ever. The J-Team has a 4-on-4 with Drago and the ice crew at the baseball field, but are easily outclassed. That is, until Jade shows up with some of our classic friends throughout the show. Mordecai and Egbert, the pig and rooster from season 3, along with Super Moose, arguably the strongest character in the universe. They also bring back the talismans, which is a fun callback to easily the most iconic part of Jackie Chan Adventures. Uncle and the Enforcers manage to save Toru, and it's really sweet to see Uncle shed a tear, knowing that his apprentice is safe. We also see the Dark Hands still show love for their old comrade Toru. Uncle mentions his backups finally arrived, which isn't Toru, but Shendu, which is an amazing plot twist. To have Shendu, the original big bad, finally return, and we even see he's overpowered by Drago's newer, more powerful form, as everyone else fights the surrounding demons. So everyone helps Shendu by throwing him all their talismans, recreating the actual most powerful character in the show. Uncle and Toru recite the chi reversal spell one last time, so let's hear it once more for old time's sake. This creates a large rift in the ground all the chi in Drago gets sucked into as he asks his father for mercy, and in Shendu's moment of weakness, Drago throws him into the pit, who grabs onto Drago's tail, sealing away the father, the son, and the rest of the chi into this spell. So the day is saved, Toru's officially promoted to a chi wizard, which we kinda knew from the future Jade episode, and Jade's officially offered a spot as a member of Section 13, which we also kinda knew from the future Jade episode. Also, Viper tells Jackie they should team up more often, and you know, I ship it. I wish they ended up as a couple, they were perfect for each other. We end Jackie Chan Adventures on a shot of Shendu and Drago still fighting back in the underworld, where Drago argues like an edgy teenager about how his dad never lets him have his own stuff. And it's a pretty funny ending to the season. Drago wasn't as interesting as Shendu or Daolon Wong or Tarakudo for me, but I appreciate him in terms of what he adds to the lore and backstory of Shendu and the underworld and the story of the show overall. I actually found Ice Master Strike and his crew more interesting than Drago, and was a fun change of pace to the Dark Hand they had been fighting for 4 seasons straight. So we have one final Jackie question of the day, but before I do, I wanted to give a quick thanks to my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters. Like a Sore Thumb, Jeffrey R, Metal Cactus, Buggy, Luther, Flinley, Richard M, Jack C, and Paul H. Thanks so much for helping me make this video series possible. I really appreciate y'all. So the final question of the day has gotta be something grand, right? Like, what was the best part of making Jackie Chan Adventures? What was your favorite cartoon? I don't know, let's see.
Hey Jackie, have you ever worked with a crocodile?
Never. That I never done it in my life.
I have no words. Really, I don't. These were definitely my least favorite Jackie questions of the day. I didn't find most of these to be very fun, but you know, you can only ask a man so many questions before they start to get a little boring. But yeah, I would say the 5th season wasn't nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be. Like, it was definitely my least favorite season, but it wasn't too far below the quality of the other seasons. The other antagonists and gimmicks were a lot more fun, like the talismans, the enchanted animals, the Oni masks, but there were some great concepts for episodes here, like the Survivor episode or the Dragon Scouts episode with the Dark Hand's nephews. My final order from least favorite to favorite season would have to be the 5th season in last, the 4th season with the Oni mask just barely in 4th, the 2nd season with the demon siblings in the middle, the 3rd season with the enchanted animals in 2nd, and I gotta go with the original season with the Zodiac animal talismans as my classic favorite season. Jackie Chan Adventures is one of the best examples of a cartoon crossing over with a celebrity, especially as an original story, and I think the quality of the show is made all the more amazing when you consider the fact this was airing alongside anime behemoths like Pokemon, Digimon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! The creators of Jackie Chan worked on some other Warner Bros. Cartoons I plan to cover in the future, like the Men in Black cartoon, so I plan to check out the movie and then the show and make a really fun video based on that. But before I do that, there's still one other cartoon originating on Kids WB that had a much more controversial final season I need to cover first. So stick around for that, and I'll catch you next Saturday. Thanks for watching and have a good one. Alright, bye.